I found a document recently I could not stop reading. Not because it was hidden. It is sitting on the Internet Archive right now. Free. Available to anyone. It is the memoir of a 7-year-old boy who was loaded onto a wagon in London in 1799. And he was told he was going to somewhere wonderful. I am going to tell you what actually happened to him. And I want you to know before we start that everything in this story comes from sources you can read yourself tonight. I will put everything linked in the description.
August 1799, London. 80 children from St Pancras Workhouse are being scrubbed clean. Not because someone cares about them, because someone is coming to look at them. The parish officials have told the children what to expect. Roast beef, plum pudding, horses to ride, silver watches. They would be transformed, the officials said, into ladies and gentlemen. The children believed it. On the wagon journey north, 5 days across England, they talked of almost nothing else. One of them was a 7-year-old orphan named Robert Blincoe. When the wagon stopped, it was not at a country estate. It was at a cotton mill in Nottinghamshire. The building was loud and dark and smelled of machine oil. The working day was 14 hours, 6 days a week. The food was porridge and black bread. The overseers beat the children when production slowed. Robert Blincoe later wrote that he thought about ending his own life many times during those years. Here is the thing that separates this story from what most people imagine when they think about child labour in the Industrial Revolution. Robert could not leave. He had been indentured, legally bound to his master until the age of 21. And when the first mill closed, his indenture was not cancelled. It was sold, like a piece of equipment, like a debt. The children went with it to the next mill, then the next. This was not an abuse of the system. This was the system working exactly as designed. Nothing about what happened to Robert Blincoe was random. It was the end of a chain of decisions made over a century, each one building on the last. It starts with land. For generations, English farming families had worked common land, land they did not own but had the legal right to use, to graze animals, grow food, sustain a family without being entirely dependent on wages. This was not charity. It was a structural feature of English rural life that had existed for centuries. Between roughly 1750 and 1850, the British Parliament passed more than 4,000 individual enclosure acts. 4,000 separate pieces of legislation, each one transferring common land from shared use into private ownership. The families who had worked that land for generations were removed from it. They went to the cities. And in the cities there was no common land, no subsistence fallback, no way to feed a family outside of wages. When wages disappeared, so did everything else. And when everything disappeared, the only place the state provided was the workhouse. By 1803, parliamentary returns recorded approximately 195,000 children between the ages of 5 and 14 in England and Wales, requiring poor relief. 195,000 children. Each one of them a cost to local ratepayers. Each one of them someone the parish needed to be rid of. The industrial north had a different problem. Mills built on rivers in remote valleys, far from any town, with no local workforce to draw from. They needed workers. Small workers. Workers who could fit into the gaps between machines. Workers who could work 14 hours for almost nothing. The system that connected those two problems had a respectable legal name: Parish apprenticeship. The legal framework dated from the Elizabethan Poor Law of 1601. Parish officials could bind a pauper child to a master by indenture, a contract that made the master legally responsible for the child until they turned 21. The original intention was to train children in a trade. By the 1780s, the word apprenticeship had become something close to a legal fiction. Mill owners in Lancashire, Cheshire, Nottinghamshire and Derbyshire sent agents to London workhouses. Parish officials received a premium for each child placed, typically between £2 and £4 per child. The children received nothing. No wages, no choice, no ability to leave. By the late 1790s, approximately 1/3 of all workers in the cotton industry were pauper apprentices. At Birch Robinson and Company in Backbarrow in 1797, of 310 workers employed, 210 were parish apprentices. A contemporary writer described what he saw at one of these operations. He wrote that the factory apprentices had been sold by auction as a bankrupt's effects. Sold by auction. His words, in the documented record. The indenture was a physical document that could be transferred between owners without the child's knowledge or consent. When Litton Mill closed in 1803, the indentures held on the St Pancras children were sold to Ellis Needham, the owner of Litton Mill in Derbyshire. Robert Blincoe went with the paperwork. He had no say in this. He was property in all but name, and everyone involved understood that perfectly well.
I want to ask you something I genuinely want you to think about before you keep watching. At what point does the legal framework indistinguishable from what it is legally pretending not to be? The indention said apprenticeship. The practice was a transferable ownership of a child's labor until the age 21. No wages, no exits, and no recourse. I am not telling you what to call that. I am asking you what you would call it if the legal name was removed.
Not every child was taken on show day. Mill owners wanted young children, small enough to fit under machinery during operation, healthy enough to survive the work, old enough to be productive. Children who were too old, too visibly unwell, or too difficult to place stayed behind. The parish had mechanisms for those children too. Under the Settlement Act of 1662, a pauper apprentice took legal settlement from the parish where they were placed. That meant the receiving parish became financially responsible for them for the rest of their lives. Parishes used this aggressively to shed not just the current cost of a child, but any future liability. Some parishes compelled local householders to take a pauper child or pay a £10 fine. Children were assigned by lottery. Many householders paid the fine rather than accept a child. When a child was reluctantly received, the outcomes were often severe. A government examination of just over 2,000 children apprenticed from London found that 1/3 were never accounted for after placement. 1/3. Gone from the record entirely. Not dead in any documented sense. Not placed successfully. Simply no longer traceable after the indenture was signed. At least 4% were known to have died. The remainder exist only as entries in parish ledgers. Indentured, sent away, and then nothing. I read the Memoir of Robert Blincoe before writing this script. The full text. It is available for free on the Internet Archive, and I am going to put the direct link in the description. I am not going to reproduce the detailed accounts of physical punishment in this video. They are in the primary source, and anyone who wants to read them can. What I will tell you is the outline. At Litton Mill, children worked 14 hours a day, sometimes through the night when production deadlines required it. There was no pay. Occasionally, a child received a single penny for working additional hours beyond the standard shift. The food was inadequate. Children sometimes returned from shifts too exhausted to eat the porridge that was waiting for them. Robert tried to run away. A tailor who worked occasionally at the mill recognized him on the road and brought him back. He tried again. He was returned again. He remained at Litton Mill until approximately 1813. He had arrived at age 7. He left at around 21. 14 years. Ellis Needham, the mill owner, went bankrupt in 1815 and died a pauper. He was never charged with any crime related to his treatment of the apprentice children. Not investigated, not prosecuted, not charged, not even formally questioned. The law that was supposed to protect the children had no enforcement mechanism. The man responsible for what happened at Litton Mill died broke and uncharged, while Robert Blincoe lived with the consequences for the rest of his life. There is a particular kind of injustice that does not look like injustice because it operated entirely within the law. This is one of those. In 1802, the British Parliament passed the Health and Morals of Apprentices Act. It was the first factory legislation in British history. Read that sentence again. First factory legislation in British history. This was 1802. The Industrial Revolution had been running for decades. Children had been working 14-hour days in cotton mills since the 1770s, and the first time Parliament decided to write down minimum standards was 1802. The Act said pauper apprentices should not work more than 12 hours a day. 12. That was the protection being offered. Not 10, not 8, 12. It required that apprentices receive 2 sets of clothing per year, that their sleeping quarters be whitewashed twice annually, that they receive basic instruction in reading and writing. These were the minimums Parliament considered necessary to legislate, which means these were not the minimums already being met. These were the conditions Parliament had evidence were being violated so consistently that a law was required. The Act had no inspectors, no penalties that were regularly applied, no mechanism for a child to report a violation. It was guidance dressed as law. Robert Blincoe arrived at Litton Mill after the Act was passed. The conditions he documented there did not reflect any of its requirements. I want to tell you about a study published in PLOS 1 in May 2023. Researchers analysed the skeletal remains of children excavated from a churchyard in Fewston, North Yorkshire. These were children who had been sent there as pauper apprentices in the early 19th century. The bones showed evidence of undernutrition, of physical damage consistent with the working conditions described in survivor testimony, of the specific kinds of stress that accumulate in a child's skeleton when that child is doing heavy, repetitive labour during the years when their bones are still forming. Robert Blincoe published his memoir in 1832. He gave evidence to a government commission in 1833. His testimony was included in that commission's official report. A parliamentary body read the account of a man who had been indentured at 7 years old and included it in a published document. And then the system continued. In 2023, the bones of children who could not speak for themselves confirmed what the children who could speak had been saying for 200 years. The bones are not a metaphor. They are evidence. Peer-reviewed, published, publicly available evidence that the system Robert Blincoe described was doing to children's bodies exactly what he said it was doing. August 1799. Robert Blincoe is 7 years old. He is on a wagon heading north from London. He thinks he is going somewhere wonderful. He spent 14 years in mills he could not leave. The man who owned the last one died uncharged. The law written to protect children like Robert limited their working day to 12 hours and had no way to enforce it. Charles Dickens almost certainly read Robert's memoir. Oliver Twist, published in 1837, begins with a parish boy offered, together with £5, to any master willing to take him. A character in that novel describes the arrangement directly. If the master found, upon a short trial, that he could get enough work out of a boy without putting too much food into him, he shall have him for a term of years to do what he likes with. England read that passage and discussed it as social commentary. It was a legal description. The Memoir of Robert Blincoe is free on the Internet Archive right now. The PLOS 1 study of the children's bones at Fewston was published in 2023 and is freely accessible. The 1802 Factory Act is in the British Parliamentary Record. The Economic History Review paper on parish apprenticeship in London by Alyssa Levine documents 3,285 pauper apprentices bound from London between 1767 and 1833. All sources are in the description. Robert Blincoe was real. His memoir is still there. And so are the bones.
I keep thinking about the show day. 80 children, scrubbed clean, lined up in rows, while adults walked past and chose. The children thought they were being selected for something good. They had been told by the people responsible for their welfare. That gap between what the children believed and what actually happened is what this channel is about. If this mattered to you, subscribe. If it does not, that is fine too. But it mattered to Robert Blincoe for the rest of his life.